Good evening, everyone. I am Josh Wills, designer by trade, and as Jay said a couple times, I am a partner and creative director at Consume and Create. It's a design and interactive studio based down in Denver. And I've worked at a few places, I've owned a few businesses, I've made a few babies. I was really excited about the opportunity to share some thoughts on how we could use design thinking to make the world a better place. And then as I sat with that problem statement, I started to get overwhelmed by the weight of that problem statement. So I thought I would explore zooming in and out and looking at that problem statement from different perspectives. Zooming way out and looking at that problem from this point of view, the Earthbud's point of view, I think I'd be a little pissed. I'd be like, what the fuck is the deal, guys? I'm a rad place. I don't need to change. But that does shine light on this phrase, save the planet, which I think is a problematic phrase. It's a flawed statement. It doesn't accurately describe our end goal and where we should be focusing our energy and efforts. A phrase like protect life on Earth more accurately describes our end goal. And I want to make emphasis on, there's a huge distinction between just existing and living, and how do we want to leave our environment for future generations? Do we want to set them up to thrive or just merely exist? And zooming in, way in by 1,000, and looking at that problem statement from an individual perspective, us as designers, as creators, we need to make sure that we're mindful of taking care of ourselves so that we're in a position to take care of other people around us and really focus time and energy on our biggest challenges. A few years back, I found myself working an absurd amount of hours. I was using a fraction of my skill set. I really started to question whether or not I wanted to be a designer anymore. I was burnt out. I wasn't finding any meaning in my work. And it reminded me of a statement that a creative director shared with me. There's no retirement parties in this industry. And that got me thinking, how could we approach our industry and our profession differently? How could we support and encourage health and well-being and longevity, sustainability as humans within this? That led me to start my own design studio. And I've really approached that as a series of experiments. Experimenting with process, setting boundaries, work-life balance. How can we create an environment that nurtures us as creatives? And that led us to really honing our focus and our purpose, which is, we believe design should be driven by insight and empathy. We use our hands, heads, and hearts to build brands that positively shape and impact the world around us. I'm going to share a few examples of projects that we've done, not as a pat on the back, but how we've delivered against this framework over the past few years. First one is Dispatch Health. They deliver on-demand urgent care to people's homes. It was started by 2 ER doctors that had a mission to make healthcare more accessible and affordable on the system side and on the patient side as well. We've also been really fortunate to work with Leopold's Distillery. They're as close as you can get to a negative zero impact or output. They use all the heads and tails of the distillation process to create cleaning supplies and disinfectant that put them in a position to create hand sanitizer and distribute that to healthcare workers and frontline workers at the height of COVID when it was in short supply. And that was a collaboration with New Belgium. We've also been very fortunate to work with New Belgium over the past few years on some sustainability initiatives, climate change initiatives, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. In my experience, New Belgium is a great example of a company that is using business as a force for good out in the world and switching up and moving over to some pro bono work that we did. We worked with a collective of makers here in Colorado that needed a brand and platform to get masks in as many hands of Coloradans that wanted them, again, during the height of COVID. Another pro bono project that we took on was working with a nonprofit, Make a Chess Move, or MACM. They use chess as a means to teach young adults life skills, thinking ahead, knowing that there is an action for every action, there's a reaction for every action. Again, placing an importance and impetus on making right moves, calculated moves. And that really allowed us to mentor these young adults. And it's an ongoing experiment to help drive diversity in our profession by exposing these young adults to different aspects of the creative profession. Zooming out again, as creative professionals across our industry, I think it's time that we move from human-centered design towards life-centered design and be really mindful of the impact and outputs that we are creating and how they affect all life and ecosystems. One great example of life-centered design that I'm always drawn to is Adobe houses. A lot of architects out here. But you gather material from the site or close to the site. You create a structure from that. You would typically mud those over. And if you don't, they just disintegrate and return to the earth. For folks that are interested in learning a little bit more about life-centered design, I'd recommend Bruce Mau's C24 book, as well as The Gift of Good Land by Wendell Berry. And I know, as I said at the beginning, it can be really overwhelming when there's so much wrong in the world, so much that feels like it's broken and needs to be fixed. But what I would encourage each and every one of you in the audience to consider is pick something off this list or identify something missing from this list and just chip away at it for the next year. You'd be surprised the impact and ripple effect that you can have.